with the big updates coming in on the Shanghai Cooperation meeting. This is with regards to Prime Minister traveling to Uzbekistan to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already reached Uzbekistan, and a meeting between the two leaders is on the cards. During the two-day summit, PM is likely to hold bilaterals with other world leaders. There's high anticipation that PM Modi might meet Chinese President Xi Jinping just days after a disengagement between Indian and Chinese troops at a key point along the line of actual control. So, as we mentioned, the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping remains the most speculated event. I'll have my colleague Srinjoy join us shortly to tell us more about this particular aspect of the SCO meet. Yes, Srinjoy, whether the interaction takes the form of a formal meeting remains to be seen. But then this will be the first between the two leaders since the border tensions flared up in 2020 and the recent disengagement, which we believe is a big step forward.
Yes, this is the first time they will be in the same room at the same time. The same applies to Shehbaz Sharif also. Now, as we know it, there are three bilaterals that are already slotted. The first will be with President Putin. This will be after lunch tomorrow, after which there will be a meeting with the Uzbek president. That, of course, has to happen because he is the official host. And the third and final meeting slotted so far is with Ibrahim Raisi, the Iranian president. These three are absolutely confirmed. As far as the Chinese President Xi Jinping's meeting is concerned, well, it is not slotted in yet, but there is considerable talk that this could well happen. Okay. Because even though it hasn't been slotted as yet, it's not showing in the official program. We are still 24 hours away from the function, and there can easily be time for such a meeting. This is especially so since so much happened as far as PP-15 is concerned. There was so much talk about the PP-15 disengagement and so on, and after that it suggests that the meeting could take place. But there is no confirmation of that as yet. Yes. It is not on the Prime Minister's agenda when I last saw it. As I said, there are only three names for bilateral meetings of the presidents of Russia, of Uzbekistan, and of Iran. China does not figure. Pakistan does not figure. Today, Prime Minister is reaching at about 10 o'clock. Now, the dinner is at 7, which means that the Prime Minister, by the time he reaches, he will either miss the dinner where both Xi Jinping and Shehbaz Sharif will be present, or he will be very, very late for it. It is likely that if he's reaching at 10 o'clock at night and the dinner is at 7, he will skip the dinner where Xi Jinping and Shehbaz Sharif are present.
Right. These are interesting and important details, and each of this would be, of course, looked at closely for implications. Srinjoy, as always, thanks very much for joining us with the important updates. So what is also important is the meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, what Srinjoy tells us is that there are only three meetings that are there in the Prime Minister's schedule. One happens to be with Mr. Vladimir Putin, and this is again coming against the backdrop of Moscow's surprise reverses in the battlefield in eastern Ukraine and the increasing global pressure, of course, to isolate Russia. India has been steadfast with its ties with Russia, and it has in fact even stepped up energy imports. Now, whether Mr. Modi chooses to signal greater warmth in ties with Russia, that will be one of the points to look out for, especially to policymakers in the Western capitals. Beyond the bilateral meetings, though, irrespective of whether they happen or not, Mr. Modi's presence at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting sends out an important message of India engaging dynamically with various power centers across the world. Let me bring in Maruf Reza joining us on the program, security and defense expert. Maruf, very good afternoon, very good evening. In fact, thanks for joining us. First of all, what kind of outcomes are we really looking for in this SCO meet? There are top leaders of Russia, China, to be present there. And each of these countries, when it comes to looking at relations with India, there are quite a few delicate issues as well currently raging. Maruf?
You see, in these summit meetings, unless there is a very detailed roadmap laid out in advance about how the summit meetings could also translate into big outcomes with reference to bilateral meetings, I don't expect anything dramatic to come out of it. In the past, India has had Mr. Modi himself very relatively regarded as a very successful meeting with Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif that was called the UFA Summit and the UFA Declaration. Nothing really eventually emerged because it went contrary to the interests of the Pakistan army. And I had said on that very occasion, 2019, that this will find its way into the dustbin in Pakistan. In this case, there are 3 or 4 major bilaterals Mr. Modi could have at the SCO summit. One is certainly with Russia. And Russia, whatever the West might say, is not down and out. Russia has a very long, drawn-out engagement history with India. So whether it's oil or defense equipment or even Russian support for India at international forums, particularly when China continues to stonewall India's efforts to get terrorists in Pakistan declared as in the UN proscribed list, Russia could continue to support India more than, say, perhaps India would support India at forums. The US would support India.
Yes.
The US has most recently obviously upset New Delhi by sanctioning new F-16 aircrafts for Pakistan. And strangely enough, the American administration says it's Pakistan's requirement to continue to fight terrorism. I mean, they think the whole world is made up of idiots, that terrorism is to be fought with F-16 and not by troops on the ground. Pakistan has always been reluctant to put troops on the ground against terrorists or insurgent groups, with the exception of General Raheel Sharif's time when they launched the operation called Zarb-e-Azab. Now, the thing is that Pakistan is a terrorist supporter. It sponsors, it harbors, I mean, it's under all sorts of schemes and all sorts of arrangements monitoring Pakistan's terror linkages. But nobody seems to be able to pin down Pakistan.
Right.
And strangely, the SCO summit is about coming out with a unified declaration against terrorism and sponsors of terror. They have an organization called RATS, and that's meant to really nail countries which talk about terrorism. Amongst the 8 countries in the SCO summit that have heads of government there, Pakistan's a prominent member, sponsored and propped up by China. So we cannot expect much from the SCO summit in which fingers can be pointed directly at Pakistan. We can expect some movement forward with Russia in terms of oil and energy.
Okay.
We can expect a meeting between Mr. Modi and President Xi Jinping, and the Chinese have an inclination to clear the ground for that with the recent de-escalation at PP-15 near Hot Springs. But again, those are small cosmetic moves towards China trying to keep India engaging with President Xi, who doesn't want to go back home and look having achieved nothing with India, because that's an area that he has to answer to the Chinese Congress, which is looking at whether they will extend his tenure for a 3rd tenure. And finally, there should be a meeting between Mr. Modi and Iran. Iran is an important old friend of India. Iran may be seen as part of the axis of evil by the United States, but Iran is an important oil-producing country. And if the US and others want to deny India Russian oil, then they have to allow us to import Iranian oil, which is of high quality. We traditionally have import terminals for Iranian oil. and Iran produces, at least used to, 17% of the world's oil. So therefore, Iran is important. Iran
Yes.
is also important in the Islamic world's geopolitics. Yes, Mr. Jaishankar has just had a good meeting with Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, but you should not discount Iran and its ability to put pressure on Pakistan. Iran and Pakistan don't have best of relations. Iran also is a kind of point where a large number of India's Shia population looks up to Iran and the leadership there.
Yes.
We have one of the world's biggest Shia populations, and Iran is a country that can help us open land routes to Central Asia through the Chabahar port and Bandar Abbas.
Yes. These are all very important aspects, Maruf, that you're highlighting for us, and important perspectives. As you said, that these two bilaterals are very much there in the Prime Minister's schedule, meeting Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and, of course, Russian President Vladimir Putin. And the points that you made about how important these bilaterals could be. Thank you very much, as always, for giving us those perspectives.